One of the challenges faced by scale modelers for generations is how to take a simple plastic toy and turn it into a lifelike representation of a real thing. A car, a train, an airplane, military vehicles, or in this case, a tiny replica of one of the tiniest Allied tanks from the Second World War, the M3 Stuart. The first step in that process is the pin wash, a way to pull out the little details and create a visually appealing contrast that elevates a scale replica. For many, it's a simple process, or at least it should be. Tonight, on our documentary news show, we'll be taking a closer look at a modeler who made this common practice far more difficult than it needs to be. Did he learn anything? Is there anything you can take away from his mistakes? And most important of all, was he actually able to make it work? Join us today for an in-depth look on Tiny Tank, Big Contrast. What is the pin wash? Well, the pin wash is really just kind of a way to pull out some of the shadows on the tank, to highlight the different pieces where they come together, and to give the eye that extra layer of contrast. How do you make the pin wash? Basically, two ingredients: paint, oil paint specifically, and enamel thinner. Go back a second. What's the secret weapon? Well, it's not too secret. It's VMS Oil Expert. It's available out there at a lot of different places, but yeah, I highly recommend it. It's nice for oil paint work because it helps it dry a little faster. In this particular version, helps give it a matte finish. A lot of oil paint naturally has a glossier finish or a semi-gloss finish to it. And I also have one for gloss finish that I tend to use a little bit for things like fuel stains, some of the stain crap around that gets around exhausts and things like that too. I find it to be really helppful. But I like the drying mechanism with it that helps it dry a little faster is handy because you get you don't have to wait quite as long for your work. I mean, quite frankly, it's great for a lazy modeler like myself. Okay, so walk me through what's going on here. Paint the picture, if you will. Well, what's happening here is I'm putting the pen wash on the turret. Actually, I'm at this stage, what you're on the screen, what's going on is I'm in the process of wiping back the pen wash. I've already applied the oil paint, the oil wash around the seams, around the bolts, the hatch doors. You can kind of see, the bottom of the turret there. And so I'm in the process of dialing back some of the oil around it. So obviously when you put a pin wash down, oftentimes it spreads a little bit further than necessarily you want it to spread. So you just give it a little chance to dry and go back in and knock it back. So another thing I have to point out here too is I wasn't very patient, or at least not as patient as I should have been with this model. And I ended up not letting, at least with the turret and some parts of the front where it initially started the pin wash process, I had not let it dry quite enough. I mean, you don't want it to dry fully, but you do want it to dry just enough, dry to the touch basically, so that it just, it's a little easier to remove, I think. But I think that's okay here because I like I had a secondary objective in mind for this. I wanted to kind of give it dial up the contrast, give it a little bit more shadow around the surface highlights, like the bolts, like the gun antenna you see here, the gun mount rather that you see here, the hatch doors, things like that. Because I think just a little bit of contrast on such a small model like this, it really helps it to stand out, gives it a little bit more of it catches your eye a little bit better. And I think that's really the advantage of the pen wash. And so this is just sort of a pen wash kind of meets oil shading around some of those parts of the tank. What's the proper ratio of paint to thinner? Oh man, that is a good question. There's not really a right answer. I mean, it's kind of something you just have to sort of eyeball and get a feel for. And it took me a while to learn that as a modeler. But I mean, essentially what I'm doing here, you can see, is I'm going back, dipping my brush in the thinner and getting it back into the little mixing area there where I'm kind of, putting it, getting it just enough to where it flows easy. I mean, I think that's really the kind of the thing. You just need to see how well it flows. And if it doesn't flow very well, then it needs more thinner. If it flows too well and doesn't really, you're not really seeing enough pigment in it, then you need a little bit more paint in it. So it's just kind of one of those things that you have to eyeball as you go along. And I'm continually here going through and mixing more of the oil wash to put on the tank as I go along. And you can see there, it was flowing pretty well, but now as I get to this other little part of the turret box here, it's not flowing quite as well, which is a signal that I don't have quite enough thinner in there, or maybe my paintbrush is running out of material that it needs to kind of continue the pen wash. So went back, got another dip, and there it's flowing pretty good again. But you can see that it's a lot, and I'm gonna have to come back in here and remove a lot of that. You see where the little eyelet, the peekaboo slot there is on the top of the turret, and it's spreading out a little bit more, and I'll have to come in and knock that out after it dries a little bit. So I'm not going to show the entire process of pen washing, the black pen wash for this entire model. And this is a tiny model, and it still took, 2, 3, maybe 4 hours. Obviously that would not be, push the bounds of ASMR even a little bit, I think. But I do want to kind of walk you around as I work my way around the turret here. I think it paints no pun intended, paints a picture of the work that's happening here. And you can kind of see where I've already done it a little bit on the other side of where my brush is right now. And now I'm turning away from it, but it does kind of add a little bit in addition to the shadows created at the seam lines and the bolts and the other parts of the tank. You can kind of see, and we'll get another shot of it, a better up close shot of it here for a little bit, but where it kind of, draws out a little bit more contrast between the parts of the tank, the panels, the top and the bottom of the turret, things like that. So anyway, I'm going to speed this up a little bit, and then we'll just kind of bliss out for a couple minutes on pen washing the turret here. After I get the excess paint wiped away, what I'm going to do is set down the old thinner brush here and grab a flat shader brush. And the point of this is to kind of, to knock it back a little bit from the middle of the panel so you don't have, more black paint out where you don't want it, but then also to kind of soften a little bit. I want the dark contrast along the seam lines on the panel lines rather, along the turret of the tank there. But this kind of blends it in a little bit and gives you a little bit of a little bit more contrast to the piece. So now you seem to have moved on from the black pen wash and you're using kind of a brownish mix. What's the logic behind that? Are you doing it again? Is it for another effect? Well, what I'm doing here is the rust wash. And it's a mix of like a brown and an orange oil paint and thinner, obviously. And I'm kind of going around the bolts and some of the edges again around the tank and just kind of giving it, gives it a little bit of a metallic look. I mean, I'm going to knock a lot of it back. So it's not going to look especially rusty per se, like a car that's been left out in the woods or something like that. But it's got kind of, it just gives it a little bit of a different look, a little bit more of a metallic look. You know, some rust builds up around the bolts as this thing's out in the woods and the swamps of Louisiana or whatever, because it's, you know, part of the Louisiana maneuvers, I guess, during World War II. Which, you know, if you've read about that, that's this, you know, extended maneuver that the early iteration of the American Army does in 1941, and it's around Louisiana and parts of this other parts of the South. And like at one point during it, there's a big hurricane and, you know, all the shit that kind of goes with that. So I want to give it, you know, just a little bit of a backstory and just to give it, you know, a little bit of an extra metallic look as some grime and rust and corrosion builds up around the bolts and some of the seam lines like that. And so in some places you'll see a little bit clearer in terms of a rust look. In some places it'll just be kind of a brownish sort of sheen to it. And I think that gives it kind of a nice, you know, it just gives it a little bit more depth and character in it, a little bit more metallic look to it, a little bit more wear and tear on it. I mean, I know this is an initial production Stuart, so it hasn't exactly been through the hills and valleys of North Africa or southern Italy just yet, but you know, it's still, it just gives it a little bit more of a elevated look to, I think, to the tank. And it's pretty much the same process as I did with the black pen wash. I'm just kind of going around the edges with it, dialing it back with a thinner. Here, though, kind of on the air vent exhaust. It's not an exhaust. I think it's more of an air vent. But anyway, I'm also putting a little bit of a streak in it. So kind of on the top ridge line of that, where it is, it gives it a little bit more of a streaking effect. Just another element, I think, to the overall wear and tear of the weathering of the tank here. So again, I'm just kind of pulling down some of the rust paint, you know, from the bolts there, from the top, and then getting it kind of along in, you know, mixed up in the top of the grate there a little bit too, blended in with that. I think it wouldn't necessarily be fully rusty, but it, you know, same effect as on the other side, only obviously you don't have the streaks because it's a grate like that. And here's a nice finished look at that area of the tank that I just went over with the rust wash. I like it. I want to show you a little bit of the work I'm doing on the side of it here too. Again, similar effect, only a little bit more streaking because it's on the side, obviously. But, you know, putting on the wash, it's kind of thick right there. And then going around the edges with it, making sure to hit some of the bolts with it. You know, thinned out, getting a little bit more on the brush, coming back to it to get it that, because this is, again, as the rust and rain and dirt and stuff like that drips down, that's where you're going to get some buildup down toward the bottom. And so what I'm going to do here, get this layer on around the top, around the bolts, along the sides there, and then I'm going to come back and make sure you get all the bolts. Obviously, you don't want to forget the bolts, very important. And then after that, I'm going to come back with this, you know, this flat sawtooth kind of brush thing and brush it down, give it kind of a streaking effect, dial back the rust tones a little bit, and just kind of give it that extra weathering wear and tear that goes along with a tank. So now that the pen wash is done and you've got the rust wash on there, it's done, right? No, actually. Next is a more involved process of dirt, dust, and mud. I'm going to try to make it look like it's been in, this particular model is the initial production. It's got U.S. 1st Armored Division decals on it. So we're going to make it look like it's been in the muck of the Louisiana maneuvers in 1941, which over the course of several months at one point was hit by a hurricane. So I think, you know, it's a good excuse to put some mud and dirt and dust on it. And yeah, that's going to be the next video. And you know, be sure to like and subscribe. And yeah, let's watch me finish this Stuart tank.